Hello, friends, and let's get started.
The night strip club Gold Lounge in Miami was famous for its luxury and extravagance. Alex entered the club just after 11 o'clock at night. He felt his heart racing, partly because of the music, partly because of the anticipation of an evening that promised to be fun and unforgettable. Derek's best friend's bachelor party couldn't be without such entertainment. It was the third strip club in the last 2 days, but everyone knew that the Gold Lounge was the final show, the cherry on the cake for the groom and his rowdy group. Alex, in his 32 years, was characterized by a calm character and common sense. But today he allowed himself to relax. After all, the occasion was quite special. The foyer of the club greeted the guests with semi-darkness, black and gold walls, and flickering of muted lamps. Everything here was imbued with expensive interior and glamour. The polished bar counter shone under the spotlights, reflecting the bottles of elite alcohol. The air was saturated with the scent of women's perfume and the subtle odor of hookah smoke. Derek, the groom, was already well intoxicated and laughing at the top of his voice, supported by his buddies, who encouraged him to order a snake dance or to take 2 strippers at once. So, Alex, Derek turned to him, nudging him foolishly with his elbow. Ready for the best night of my life? I'm about to step into the shackles of marriage. After all, goodbye to freedom and a wild lifestyle. He moaned theatrically and laughed. Alex grinned, evaluating the velvet sofas and a small stage with a pole in the middle of the room. Buddy, I can already imagine how you'll remember tonight in a couple of months, Alex said. Your future wife, Lisa, will probably forbid you even a friendly cuddle with another woman. Oh, come on. Derek waved his hand, looking at his buddies, who were seating themselves closer to the stage. She's understanding, but not too often, but still. Tonight is my last free party. I've got a party. The company took the VIP box next to the stage. Dark wood tables, soft leather armchairs. In the center, there was already prepared whiskey on a silver tray. Everything screamed luxury and privacy. Derek's friend, who was in charge of coordinating this bachelor party, had managed to arrange it with the club manager. They were in for a top-notch show. Alex sipped his whiskey, feeling the soft warmth of the alcohol gradually spreading through his body. He liked to control himself and rarely allowed himself to do too much, but the atmosphere of the club was apt for fun. Girls in short, shiny outfits and high heels scurried between tables, offering hookahs, cocktails, or glasses of champagne. Behind the mirrored bar, a young bartender entertained the crowd by tossing shakers, risking to drop them at any moment, but always catching them and eliciting applause. Well, it was time for Derek to get the coolest private party ever, shouted one of his buddies, Nicholas, and squinted slyly. He deserved the best tonight. The noisy company responded with cheers of approval. The whole stage and the party literally vibrated with the rhythm of music and explosions of laughter. Alex glanced at the groom, who, smiling widely, winked at him. It will start soon. No one guessed what time bomb had already been planted under them. No one suspected that this night for some of those present would become not a celebration at all, but a disaster that would wipe out the rest of their lives. Table of orders. The waitress brought a menu with photos of dancers, explaining who could perform what program. The guys began to discuss who to choose for the main event of the evening, who dances more incendiary, what program will bring more emotions. Let's take Red Panther, Nicholas suggested, leafing through the bright laminated pages. Look, it's all laid out there. Passionate show with elements of oriental motifs, interactive with the groom and light body art. That's what I'm looking for. How about a cat in a leopard bodysuit? Chuckled another friend, Brian, showing a picture of a long-legged blonde with sensual eyes. What if that would be cooler? Derek shrugged, graciously giving his friends a choice. Alex, meanwhile, pulled back a little, deciding to let the guys have some fun. He lazily shifted his gaze to the stage, watching as another dancer moved frankly to a slow track, stretching her movements to attract the audience's attention. And it was obvious to the naked eye that most of the club guests were already captivated by her looks and smooth curves of her body. I think we will make a surprise, the waitress assured the guys. Today we have a performance of Red Goddess. She is rarely on stage, but if she was booked, it means that the groom is lucky. So I'll make sure that she comes out and makes this evening unforgettable." The boys smiled approvingly. The music in the hall stopped for a moment, taking the old rhythm with it. The incendiary beats were replaced by a languid and exciting melody with heavy bass. The light in the club was dimmed to semi-darkness, leaving only a light illumination above the stage. And then the voice of the host, low and mesmerizing, sounded in the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a special guest, the future groom Derek. Let's congratulate him with a round of applause." There was loud applause, especially from his own company. And especially for him, by special order, our Red Goddess comes on this stage. At the same moment on the stage, illuminated by several spotlights, she appeared in bright red satin lingerie, with feathers on her arms and a mask on her face. The material of her outfit reflected the light, creating a soft, glowing effect. The girl was slender, with long legs accentuated by high heels. The music gradually increased, giving her gait even more grace and sensuality. Alex looked up with interest, but without much enthusiasm. It seemed to him that he was unlikely to see something really new, because the whole atmosphere of the strip club had already become familiar lately. But as soon as he took a closer look, something inside him instantly stirred. He couldn't quite put his finger on what it was until his eyes caught one detail, a mole on her left thigh. He knew that mole perfectly. It went through his mind, "No, that's impossible." The girl made a graceful pirouette, exposing part of her thigh, and Alex felt everything inside him clench. Shock gripped his mind. His heart pounded with frantic speed, and an alarming ringing sounded in his temples. "It can't be. It's her," an inner voice almost shouted. But he himself couldn't believe he was seeing something like this. It was his wife, Megan, the woman he'd been happily married to for years now. He swallowed a bitter spit automatically, trying to keep his composure. A hot wave of resentment and jealousy came rushing over him, but he remained almost motionless on the outside. Nearby, Derek began to playfully encourage him. "Hey, Alex, what's so tense? Enjoy the show, friend." Alex was grateful for the darkness of the hall, which hid his face for the moment. He tried with all his might to keep a kind of coldness, so as not to give away his storm of emotions. His shaking fingers lightly touched the whiskey glass. Shock and anger made him want to throw everything out at once, to stand up, to shout, to get his wife off the stage and demand an explanation. But he realized that he didn't want to make a spectacle of himself. He could hardly breathe, and his heart was pounding like a madman. His mind was working feverishly. Could it be just a coincidence? There are many moles, the figures are similar, but when she started moving on the stage, Alex recognized every movement, every curve of her body, which he had seen 1,000 times at home, in their bedroom. Any illusion of coincidence dissipated like smoke. "She's," Alex barely audibly blurted out. Brian, who was sitting next to him, heard nothing but an indistinct sound. The guys were too absorbed in the performance to pay attention. The music switched to a more languid track, with slight oriental motifs that gave the dance an added sensuality. Red Goddess made a few fluid movements with her hips, running a hand around her waist and sliding her palm over the inside of her thighs. The light from the spotlight slid across her skin, making her image even more seductive. Alex felt a volcano of rage boiling inside him. Megan began to slowly descend from the stage, heading towards the groom's company. Her job was to give the privilege of privates to the most important person in this party, the groom, Derek. But after taking a few steps, she stopped for a moment. Alex noticed how her gaze twitched in his direction, as if she instinctively sensed his presence. However, the music, the lights, the screams of the admiring spectators, and the general atmosphere did not allow Megan to quickly orient herself to the situation. She walked over to Derek and leaned toward him, exposing her seductive body. The guys cheered. Someone started banging on the table, encouraging the dancer. Alex watched it, almost ceasing to breathe. His face was petrified. His fingers still clenched the glass, clenched into a fist. He would never have allowed such a scene to happen if his life hadn't been turned upside down 5 minutes ago. Megan, following the program, settled smoothly on Derek's lap, running her hands over his chest. The groom chuckled in surprise and covered his eyes, jokingly pretending that he was already completely bewitched. The company cheered up the situation, shouting phrases like, "Wow, that's a goodbye, Derek," or "You're lucky to have friends." Alex saw the whole picture as in slow motion. Every movement of his wife, every breath she took causing him a lump in his throat, disgust, and chilling resentment. It seemed to him that any second of delay was torture. But he was still struggling with himself, trying to figure out what to do. Should he stand up and announce to everyone that this dancer was his wife? Or quietly leave, having collected his thoughts and solved everything with her alone? However, fate and Megan herself amended his plan. At the climax of the dance, she lifted herself up, turned to the audience, and smoothly pulled the mask off her face. In the semi-darkness of the club, her features were clearly defined. Expressive eyes, thin cheekbones, and lips, which Alex had looked at so many times with love and tenderness. Now he looked at her with hatred and misunderstanding. But for the rest of the company, it was a new sight. They didn't know Megan by sight that well, for she rarely appeared in the company of his friends and was often busy with her own work. Taking off her mask, Megan did a couple more spectacular moves and glanced at the crowd, trying to catch a reaction. But this time she actually saw Alex. It was only a brief glance, but she knew instantly from his eyes that the irreparable had happened. There was a second of dead silence as everyone in the company, sensing the atmosphere, instinctively turned to Alex. His expression, a chilling mixture of anger and pain, spoke for itself. "Alex," Megan started to say in a slumped voice, but the music swallowed her words. Nevertheless, the whole table froze. No one was shouting or applauding now. Their merriment had been replaced by confusion and the realization that something very wrong was going on. The men began to look at each other, and the groom, Derek, remained seated with complete incomprehension on his face. Alex slowly stood up, as if preparing for a spurt. He felt rage bubbling inside him, looking for any way out. The glass in his hand trembled. The air felt heavy to him. His pulse pounded in his ears. He took a few steps toward the stage. "Alex, what's wrong with you?" Nicholas muttered, trying to understand why his best friend looked like he was ready to blow everything around him. Alex kept silent. He didn't want to make a tragicomedy, but his soul was torn to pieces by the betrayal. The whole situation seemed like a monstrous farce. He kept looking into Megan's eyes, and she into his, and the whole club seemed to freeze, feeling the powerful energy of the condensed emotions. Alex approached the stage, his every step sounding in time with the loud bass and heartbeat. Megan took a half step back. Her eyes widened with fear and shame. She realized she was torn by several feelings at once, wanting to explain herself, hide, run for her life, or fall to her knees and apologize. But there was no turning back now she'd been caught in the most humiliating moment imaginable. And worst of all, it wasn't a random one-time performance. Alex had no idea how many times she could have done this. He stopped right in front of her, holding himself back from exploding. A mask of absolute coldness was frozen on his face. He was like an ice statue, behind which the flames of hell would soon burst forth. Everyone in the club realized something wrong was going on. And at that moment, Alex, without saying a word, took off his wedding ring from his finger. The movement was precise, as if calibrated in advance. He raised the ring to eye level and turned suddenly to Jason, the huge guard who stood a few feet away from them. He was dressed in a classic black suit that emphasized his powerful figure. Alex held the ring out in front of him. "Put on," he said loudly and clearly, and the crowd around him gasped in confusion. Jason was confused, not knowing how to react. But Alex went on, his voice so hard and loud that no one dared interrupt him. "Take it," he said, and then, literally grabbing the guard's hand, he put the ring on his finger demonstratively. The people around them didn't realize what was happening, only whispered vigorously. Megan stood with her cheeks burning, and inside her, All the screams merged into one common pain and horror. Alex was unrecognizable. Whereas before he had been calm and poised, now there was an incredible strength and determination in him. The scene itself looked almost absurd, but it reeked of such tension that people held their breath. The music ceased to exist for everyone present. "Now," Alex said, looking into Megan's face, "you can dance all night, but the house, the money, and me are out of your reach." It sounded like a judgment, clear and brutal. His voice pierced the space, slicing through the air like a blade. If there had been laughter and lightness in the Gold Lounge before, now everything was smothered in a sepulchral silence. People from other parts of the club peered curiously into the VIP area, trying to figure out what drama was unfolding there in front of everyone. Megan felt her legs give out. She tried to say something, but her throat was dry and the words wouldn't come. Pictures of their life together came into her mind. Alex's happy face, planning vacations, choosing furniture for the house, discussing future children. And now she realized that it had all shattered in 1 second. Humiliated, she stood in the middle of the stage, half-dressed in red lingerie, in front of her husband, whom she had betrayed in the most disgusting way. "Alex," finally came out of her mouth, but he didn't even turn his head. He stared through her like she was nothing. The tension had reached a point. Jason, one of the club's largest and most formidable security guards, realized that the situation could get out of hand. Standing next to Alex, still holding the hand on which the other man's wedding ring was now dangling, he tried to solve the issue by his own methods. He grabbed Alex by the shoulder, intending to pull him aside and calm the emerging scandal. But Alex, lashing out like a spring, knocked Jason's arm away and clenched his fist with force, ready to strike if he continued to try to make physical contact. His eyes were lightning, and his voice sounded like thunder. "You've already taken my ring. Don't make me give it to you in the face." Jason recoiled for a moment, stunned by such certainty. He was used to the idea that people who drank and said too much were usually afraid of guards. But here it was different. Alex, though he'd had a couple of drinks, remained sober in his rage and made it clear that he wouldn't let himself be harmed. The crowd whispered even louder. Someone turned on his phone camera, starting to take pictures. Someone dared to shout something like, "Wow, that's drama," or "Damn, that's rough." But no one dared to stand up and intervene, except maybe a couple of waitresses who, not knowing where to put themselves, stared wide-eyed at the scene. Derek, the groom, had been in complete shock the whole time. He looked at Megan and Alex, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. It was like he couldn't get his head around the fact that the club dancer was his best friend's wife. "Hey, Alex, what's going on here? Is it your wife?" Derek whispered, finally realizing that he'd seen Megan around a couple of times at the previous parties, though he didn't know her well. Alex didn't answer. He had already done what he thought he had to do, and he wasn't going to be here another minute. His emotions raged in his soul. He wanted to fall through the ground from humiliation, from the fact that their family betrayal was publicly exposed. But at the same time, he knew clearly that he had to go out a winner, without giving anyone any reason to doubt that his life was his to control. Especially not Jason, who was still standing there looking confused. Finally, Alex cast one last contemptuous glance at Megan and spoke in a way that the whole room seemed to hear him. "Congratulations, my dear, on the premiere." His voice sounded mocking and icy. "I wish you big earnings, but without me. And if you once again get in my way, you'll regret that even married." With these words, he turned and headed for the exit, leaving behind the bewildered friends, guards, guests, and Megan herself, who froze under the blinding light of the spotlight, not knowing whether to run after him or stay. But she stood there, shaking with the realization of her mistake and horror. All her internal excuses collapsed before they could be born. An hour had passed since Alex had left the Gold Lounge. During this time, he drove home in a frenzy through the night streets of Miami, where the bright lights of shop windows and clubs only fueled his rage and reminded him of what had happened. His mind was feverish. How could she? Why? How many times had she done this? Disgust grew inside bitterness. But most of all, it hurt his wounded male ego, because he'd trusted Megan, loved her, envisioned a family and children with her. When he walked into the house, he could feel how false everything seemed. The traitorous smell of Megan's familiar perfume was in every room. Their family photos, arranged on the shelves, now looked like a mockery of him. The black and white photo from their wedding, with Megan looking happily at Alex. And then, after a while, he found out who she really was. Remembering her words about her frequent business trips at night or late shifts at work, Alex cursed himself for being naive. How many times had he brushed aside doubts, thinking that she just loved her career? Now everything was falling into place. Anger gave him strength. He began methodically packing Megan's things into large travel bags and suitcases. Stockings, underwear, dresses, blouses, and suits for the office. Everything flew into the bags, piled carelessly and indiscriminately. Sometimes he felt like cutting them with scissors out of anger, but stopped himself, still maintaining his inner discipline. Let her go away with what she holds dear. I don't care, he thought, clenching his teeth. It was about 4 a.m. when an impromptu display of suitcases formed in front of the house. Alex stepped out onto the lawn, breathing deeply as if after an intense workout. The coolness of the night cooled his temper a little, but it couldn't extinguish the storm in his chest. He understood. Megan would come, ask for forgiveness, maybe make excuses or blame him, but Alex had already made up his mind. There was no turning back. Toward 5 o'clock in the morning, he heard the sound of a car pulling up in the distance. Alex stood at the entrance, waiting. Megan got out of the cab, wearing a hastily thrown jacket over her stage outfit. Apparently, she hadn't had time to change properly, having run out of the club after him in hysterics. The headlights caught her face, faded and confused. She was shivering, either from the chill of the night or from fear. Alex, she began pleadingly, closing the cab door behind her. Listen to me, please. I'll explain everything. But Alex didn't make a step towards her. He stood with his arms crossed on his chest, near the suitcases. His expression was cold, his gaze heavy. She moved closer, but he made a warning gesture, telling her to keep her distance. You made your own choices, he said, pointing to her things. There are your suitcases. You can dance in the street without me. He threw one of the suitcases closer to her, signaling that she was no longer welcome in the house. Megan cried, trying to throw herself at him. Alex, no. I can explain. I couldn't tell you. I needed the money. I was afraid you'd. She choked on her tears, trying to justify herself. It was all for us. I didn't want you to feel that I was becoming a burden. Please believe me. I never slept with clients. I only danced. I wasn't literally cheating on you. Her excuses mixed with sobs. Alex listened to it, and something inside him clenched even tighter. He didn't know where was the truth and where was the lie. Now, any of her words seemed to be empty sound. He only interrupted coldly. Do you really think it matters? Even if you only danced. You lied to me every day, talking about some meetings and projects you're involved in. And all for what? To hide under the spotlight like that, getting paid to dance? Maybe I'd understand if you confessed, but after that dash, he shook his head, remembering the whole disgusting scene at the Gold Lounge. No, Megan. We're done. Everything. Neighbors, hearing the screams, started looking out their windows. Some went out on the porch, turning on their phone records in the silence of the suburb. Every word was perfectly audible. Those who knew Alex and Megan to be a decent couple stood in utter bewilderment, taking pictures of what was happening. All of this only added fuel to the fire of humiliation. Megan sobbed, clutching her head. Alex, please. She screamed, trying to get closer. I love you. It was a mistake. I only did it for the money. But Alex defiantly turned his back to her and walked towards the house. He felt that every word she said now sounded like a pathetic attempt to escape. The picture was completed by the scattered suitcases on the lawn, next to which a cab stopped. The driver looked puzzled, but tried to keep out of sight. Megan, lost between tears and hope, made another attempt. I wanted to save up money for our future family, she tried to justify herself, shifting to a husky whisper. I'm sorry. I was afraid to admit that we were in debt. But Alex had already entered the house, slamming the door loudly, as if putting an end to their relationship. The lock on the door clicked, cutting her off from him. She stayed outside, seeing the lights in the windows of the house go out one by one. It was getting lighter outside. The city was slowly waking up, and Megan realized that she was being asked to leave, and to do so immediately. For 40 minutes, she squatted on the doorstep, sobbing, but Alex was undeterred. Soon one of the neighbors timidly approached her and offered to call the police or help her. However, she, realizing the hopelessness, refused. With the cab still standing by, she finally forced herself to get up, gather her scattered belongings, and drive away, sobbing in shame. It had been a month since that memorable scandal. Alex seemed to have experienced a lifetime in those 4 weeks. He issued the divorce quickly. Megan, deprived of any moral resource and on the verge of a nervous breakdown, did not fight in court for either property or alimony. She realized that any questioning under oath, any exposure, and her reputation in a puff of dust. Alex had only given her the option of taking her personal belongings and leaving without a scandal. And so today was the day it was officially over. Alex walked out of the courthouse in a business suit, holding the divorce papers in his hands. He no longer felt the rage that had burned his heart in the Gold Lounge. He felt devastated, but also liberated. Everything had been resolved, and the way back was closed. Now only forward. He was met outside by Derek, who had remained a loyal friend despite the unpleasant situation at his bachelor party. He clapped Alex on the shoulder, trying to be supportive. "I'm sorry about the whole thing. If I'd known what kind of red goddess would come out to us, I never would have called." "Forget it," Alex answered coldly but calmly. "She's the only one to blame. I hope you and your Lisa will never know such a thing." Derek nodded, realizing that words were powerless. They hugged briefly, expressing male solidarity. After that, Derek left to go about his business, and Alex got in his car and headed to the gym, a place where he could relieve his stress and reset his head. He'd been boxing for a long time, but had recently abandoned training due to stress. Now he intended to get back everything that had once given him energy and pleasure. The gym smelled of sweat and rubber mats. The sounds of gloves hitting pairs and athletes' concentrated sniffling could be heard. Alex changed into training shorts and a t-shirt, went to the punching bag, clenched his gloved fists, and began to perfect his punches, one after another. Each blow seemed to knock the remnants of resentment out of him. He imagined Megan, her phony explanations, the tears that could not change anything. His strokes became more and more precise, and his heart beat more evenly, picking up the right rhythm. Half an hour of intense training, and he felt pleasantly tired. He threw off his gloves and walked to the mirror, looking at his reflection. There he was, Alex, free, strong. Yes, he had survived betrayal, humiliation, public shame. But he hadn't broken. On the contrary, it became clear that his character was stronger than he thought. Remembering that his phone had accumulated a lot of messages, he checked messengers. There were words of encouragement from friends, business proposals, and even a few flirtatious messages from girls he knew. Life went on. As he walked back to his car, the thought of leaving a brief post on social media popped into his head so he wouldn't have to explain to everyone and anyone that it was over between him and Megan. He took a selfie against the backdrop of the gym, slightly sweaty from working out, tense muscles, serious face, but a slight smile on his lips. Under the photo, he wrote, "Better to be alone than live with someone who doesn't appreciate what she has." After publishing the post, Alex felt a sense of relief. It was like he'd put the final stop to the drama. The comments sprinkled with likes, hearts, and words of encouragement from friends. "You're right, bro. It's all for the best. We know you. You'll get through this and get stronger." That's quite a story. I still can't believe it happens. Alex read the comments and smiled. He knew that there were enough people around ready to lend a helping hand. And he realized that even though he had a painful breakup in his life, the best was ahead of him. Now he didn't look back, because he saw nothing there but betrayal. And ahead were new opportunities and women who could appreciate his devotion and love. A few days later, he booked a ticket for a week's vacation to the ocean. He decided to change the environment for a while, to recharge himself with sunshine and a healthy lifestyle. His friends were sympathetic to his desire to leave. Just on the airplane, looking at the clouds passing under the wing, Alex caught himself thinking that he was relieved. He no longer needed to lie to himself, to harbor resentments and doubts, to look for proof. He was free. And Megan, he didn't know what was wrong with her now or what she would do. He was far from wanting to retaliate against her in any way more than he already had. He had no goal of ruining her career or her life. She'd chosen her own road and let her figure out how to live her life on it. He was firmly convinced of only one thing. She could never enter his life again. Concluding this series of hard days, Alex realized that male pride, the ability to stand up for oneself and set priorities, these are not just words. It is the foundation upon which his character, his future, rests. Albeit with pain, albeit through humiliation, he still came out of the situation stronger. And now, looking ahead, he saw only his own happiness, not clouded by lies and treason. And so ended Alex and Megan's story, with no hint of a return. He put a stop where many might have agonized and doubted for a long time. His act at the Gold Lounge, when he silently slipped the engagement ring on the security guard's finger, had already become legendary among his acquaintances. Some said, "That's too tough," while others admired him and called him a real man who wouldn't tolerate deception. But Alex himself did not like to remember that night. For him, it was a painful past, which taught him the main thing: to take care and respect himself, not allowing anyone to trample his feelings and trust. And in a way, he was grateful to fate for the lesson, albeit a bitter one, because now he knew for sure, if a man does not value what he has, he loses everything. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.